How's it going, everybody? I'm Ryan. He's Abby. We're the Expansion Bros, and hockey is officially back. The Sabres have played 2 games. The Canucks have 2 games coming up this week. The opener is tonight, I guess, depending on when you listen to this episode. But we're ready. We're back. Preseason's just about wrapped up, and it's officially time to start the season. So, Abby, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Fall has quickly become my favorite season, just because it's hockey season. You have other sports like football and baseball going on, and pumpkin spice lattes.
More of an apple crisp oat milk macchiato guy, but
Whoa,
it's
that's a little complex for my baby palate.
it's one of the newer ones. It came out like a couple of years ago. But we're not here to just
Okay, okay.
talk about Starbucks. We're here to talk about hockey. And we got to get ready to go, man. Like it's prime time.
Woo.
The Sabres have played too. Let's get into our normal routine. If you guys are just joining us and it's the start of the season, you can find us on Twitter at Expansion Bros Pod. You can interact with us there. We will be live tweeting throughout the games and giving you
Give
our
us a
thoughts
follow.
there between episodes here. And it's just generally your way to ask us questions and give feedback. And then the traditional way we do this is every week you're going to get a podcast from us at the beginning of the week. We're going to recap some of the things that we saw in the previous week, preview what's coming up, and of course, you know it's us. We're going to talk about a little something in between here or there and everywhere. So today, I wanted to start, Abby, by picking your brain because last episode was our season predictions.
Yeah.
Analytics people have produced their season predictions, and I wanted to get your take and your thoughts on how some of these models view the teams, ours, and then we probably won't dive too deeply into the rest of the league, but just get your gauge, your thoughts, see which ones seem to be. There's 2 that agree here. I've got 3 for you. 2 agree, 1 does not, and I really like the one that does not. So
I sense a common theme then between the two.
yes, slightly. But no, here we go. So we're going to start with The Athletic, Dom Luszczyszyn, who does a lot of great work for The Athletic. His analytics are really, really cool. One of the things I did want to plug right at the start of this too is if you guys are just interested in a quick breakdown, so Sabres fans, maybe you're interested in the Canucks, or Canucks fans, maybe you're interested in the Sabres, but you don't feel like watching, but you still want to know how everything went. You can go to hockeystatcards.com. I'll throw the link in the description of the show today. But you can go and sign up for your favorite team or another team, and you can get just the hockey stat cards emailed to you. And you're like, what's in these stat cards? Well, what it does, it's going to rank every skater and assign them a number, right? Owen Power, so far this season, 1.05 average game score, right? That's pretty good considering last year Sam Reinhart, 1.55, Barkov, 1.5, Matthew Tkachuk, 1.36, right? So that's just something that you guys could do. So help you stay informed of who's playing well, who's not, and dip your toes in the water analytically here. But I mentioned hockey stat cards because Dom Luszczyszyn builds those, and he uses natural stat tricks data to publish those. But anyway, here we go. It all ties in, I promise. I'm not just a crazy madman.
just go, numbers nerd.
But let's go ahead and start with the Vancouver Canucks in this model. I don't have
Yes,
to look
please.
very far from the top because he's got them projected at 105 points this year,
Ooh, yes,
which is a
please.
95% playoff percentage. You guys would be the 3rd best team or 4th best team in the league, 2nd best in the Pacific. He does have the Oilers projected as the number 1 team in all of
That's
hockey,
fair.
surprising absolutely nobody. Then they've got you at a 17% chance to make the cup and a 9% chance to win the cup. Those are also actually 9% is the 3rd best. And I probably think that Edmonton being in your division with a 21% chance to win the cup is probably why your chances are so low.
hmm Regardless, I think what like 9% is probably it's a pretty good odds considering right there's like 32 teams. So like what if you just go on like 1 in 32, that's like what 3%. So triple the odds of the average team to get the cup. I'll take that. I think that makes sense for a contending team. Obviously, we're not the top team at the moment, but we have a lot of youth injected into the team now, right? We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think this is really good, especially after last year, right? We have a lot of players going through a lot of things, injuries and all that, to still have such good odds and analytics to get into the playoffs and do some damage. It's a different era for Canucks hockey, and it's very, very exciting.
I'd love to see the day that the Sabres are projected in triple digit points, like at the start of the
Yeah.
season. Don't have to prove it. Like it's just the projection at this point. Speaking of
Yeah.
the Sabres, though, his model has us projected at 88.8 points. So we're going to round that up to 89 points. Hold on. I see your face. And that's a 29% chance at the playoffs. Obviously, there's like a less than 1% chance to make the cup and like virtually no chance to win it based on the model. However, I will say analytical models can only use past looking data. He can't manipulate the Lindy Ruff effect. So I'm actually kind of satisfied with 89 points. I'd love to be able to prove him wrong, to say that the Granato was holding the team back, or not even that, but Lindy Ruff can get more out of our players.
Elevate the
That
team. Yeah.
Tage Thompson and Tuck and Darlene and those guys can get back to what they were a couple years ago. That's really what the projections hinge on too, because they wrote a corresponding article on The Athletic talking about that, right? That like 89 points, sure, but that's kind of the midpoint for them. But if things go back to where they were, and we're kind of projecting that and predicting that the new scheme and system and way that Lindy Ruff is going to coach could help the Sabres exceed this 89 point mark, and I think they wouldn't have to exceed it by too much, maybe 5-6 points.
I was gonna say close to 95, 94.
To be a legitimate wild card contender. So maybe I'm not trying to say that they're projected at 80 and I think they can get 102, right? I'm only thinking that maybe that's 3 wins, right? We're talking 3 wins above projection, which I don't think is that crazy. So I know it doesn't look as flashy as look at us. We're the 4th best team in the league and 105 points.
105 points. Like, oh yeah, no doubters about it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think there's reasons to be optimistic here. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with what we've been saying. If everything goes and trends the way that we expect it to, the Sabres could have a good season. But if the Sabres still look like the Sabres as they are currently constructed, then they're probably going to miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
We will then move over to Evolving Hockey, which has a lot of great analytics. I reference their numbers a lot. Dom Luszczyszyn based a lot of his models off of Evolving Hockey's data too. So very reputable source here as well. Again, starting in the Pacific, they have you guys falling way off of Dom's projections. 101 points in an 88% playoff percentage.
Scared the crap out of me. I was like, oh my God, I think it's like 92, 93. Okay, I'll live with 101 as well. That's fine.
And one standard deviation on either side would be 8.2 points. So they realistically think that your season is going to be between 93 and 109 points.
You know what? I understand it's a standard deviation, but that seems like such a huge variance. One probably wins the division, and one is fighting for a wild card, might not get in.
Right, but I think the midpoint in the most likely scenario is this 101 points. I know 8 points feels like a lot, but in the grand scheme of 82 games, that's 4 wins. That's what, 5% of the season only that could vary here. So I don't think it's that crazy. Obviously, when you hear 93 points, you think pretty bad, but I think that window, you guys are going to be closer to the middle or higher end of that window.
Yeah, hopefully.
Then, talking about the Buffalo Sabres, they have the Sabres projected for 94.2 points and a 62.5% chance at the playoffs with a standard deviation of 8.3. So again, kind of similar to Dom's model, yet Evolving Hockey isn't as high on the rest of the division as Dom is, because they have the Sabres with the 3rd most points in the Atlantic.
Whoa! They agree with the Demko guarantee.
Yes, they do. So just to break it down here, they've got Panthers at 108, Leafs at 100, Sabres at 94, Lightning at 93.9, Senators at 93.2, and Bruins at 91.
Whoa, they're a little higher on the Sens than me, but I think I totally see the Sabres sneaking into that 3rd spot. That's an interesting model, and I think it's funny. Everyone has this consensus of the Leafs and the Panthers. I think those are the 2 teams in that division that everybody seems to agree is going to make the playoffs, even if you're like really high on either the Lightning or the Bruins. Everyone, I think, has Toronto and Florida in those top 3 spots.
And I think just based on the talent level and the track record and the roster moves, right, you'd have to agree with them, right? To put it in perspective, the Atlantic in Dom's model from The Athletic is Toronto at 106, Florida at 105.
They get
He
one and
doesn't have
two.
it. Or Tampa at 99, Boston at 96.6, Ottawa at 92.6, and then Buffalo at 88.8. So you can see it's a little bit more spread out, but there's still that group of what the heck's going to happen between Tampa, Boston, Ottawa, and Buffalo, right? Those are, I guess, the four teams. Detroit is not looking good in anybody's model. Detroit is closer to the Canadiens than they are to the Bruins in evolving hockey. And the same thing holds true on the Athletic. 81 points for the Red Wings, 80 for the Canadiens on the Athletic, 79 for the Red Wings, 75 for the Canadiens on evolving hockey.
I'd be curious to see if they kind of have a similar season to that of the Coyotes from, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, where they had a really hot start. And then in January, everything fell apart and they missed the playoffs. I know it's kind of similar to what happened to Detroit this year, but Detroit did end up picking it back up at the end of the year and almost made it. I would think it sounds more similar to that Arizona where they still were pretty far from the playoffs after that really, really hot start. So I'd be curious about that just because, again, Detroit has a lot of talent, right? You think Lucas Raymond, Mo Seider, Patrick Kane, Dylan Larkin. They have a ton of talented players on their team, but if you look at some of the teams that missed the playoffs, plenty of them have tons of talent. You look at St. Louis, right? Like Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou. They have talented players on this team, and talented players miss the playoffs. So I'd just be curious to see if they come off with a hot start or they come on hot late in the year, but they still end up fairly low in the overall standings.
And then I guess I should just be fair. Let's talk about the Pacific between these two models. And then on the last model, we'll just talk about our teams. With evolving hockey, the rest of the Pacific, they've got the Kraken at third at 91.
Whoa, that's a hot take.
The Kings in fourth with 90.7. The Flames in fifth with 88.3. And the Golden Knights in sixth with 88.
Whoa, very low on the Golden Knights.
Yeah, and to put that in perspective again, let's talk about Dom and the Athletic. They've got Oilers, obviously, then the Canucks. Then it is, oh God, the Pacific, this is going to test my knowledge. I think it is Vegas at 94, followed by LA at 93, Seattle at 87, and then Calgary at 79. So Dom is much lower on teams like I guess higher on the Kings, lower on the Flames than evolving hockey. And the Kraken, correct.
Yeah, so it sounds like evolving hockey is a little more takes off-season acquisitions a little more into account, right? If you remember, Seattle got Brandon Montour, Ottawa got Linus Ullmark. So it seems like evolving hockey almost seems to favor more teams that had the bigger moves in the off-season, which is interesting.
It's probably due to their just analytics being better rather than the individual game score. I don't know how they do it, right? I'd love to learn more about it. They use a Monte Carlo simulation here on the Athletic. I'm sure.
I'm more of a Monty Python guy myself.
I'm sure Dom does the same thing. It's very classic. That's just as you're just simulating a ton of times in those. So the last one though we have to talk about is everybody's favorite pie chart that goes around all the time, all season long. It is Money Puck.
Ooh.
I don't believe there is a points projection.
I should say Money Puck is also a sick name.
Yes, that is a fantastic. I love their projections. They've got the deserve to win-o-meter. It's great. It's a fantastic free resource. I don't think it's the best one out there. Don't get me wrong. I think it's great and it's free, right? So anybody that is just dipping your toes in the water here, they've got great glossary of information and breakdowns for you. And that obviously the deserve to win-o-meter is a really simple way to gauge how should you interpret the expected goals difference. But I think that it's a free one versus some of the paid ones that are behind closed doors too. And then there's ones not even available to the public that are even better than this. So either way, yes, thank you. Appreciate that. Washington, Vancouver, 80.4% chance to make the playoffs.
Okay.
And a 5.6% chance to win the cup.
I don't like that projection as much.
Yeah, I know, right? That is the 7th best odds to win the cup now. So it seems like, you guys go, I guess they're not talking much as points, so it's hard to really qualify it here. But Edmonton's still number 1, followed by Dallas, Carolina, Colorado, Florida, the Rangers, and then you guys.
Yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable to have us there, but obviously, all those teams listed ahead, I think, are all playoff locks for sure. I don't think we see any of those guys missing the playoffs. It's just a matter of, I guess, assessing who'll be able to do more damage in the playoffs, considering they're not looking at regular season points. Um, so that's interesting.
One thing I should note too, I'm about to talk about the Sabres, is that money pucks will account for the 2 games the Sabres have already played. And same
Mm,
thing for the New Jersey Devils, right?
I see.
So the Sabres are currently sitting at a 38.1% chance to make the playoffs, according to Money Puck, which is above
Uh,
the Athletics model at 29%. But I'd have to assume they'd think we are doing much worse points wise because
yeah.
they have us in 7th of the Atlantic teams to make the playoffs. The only
Wait,
team
so
we have a better chance of making the playoffs than is Montreal.
they're very high on the Atlantic then, eh?
Yeah, it's honestly wild. They've got no, the Wild are in the Central. The Florida, sorry, I had to do it to
I
myself.
love that one. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. That was great.
No, back on track here. Florida has an 83.3, followed by Tampa with 74.7, Toronto with 73.6. So Money Puck
Hmm.
is going out and saying Florida, Tampa, Toronto. That's the first time I think we've seen Tampa as the third best team in the division. No. I should say that the Athletic also had Tampa in third behind Florida and
Yeah.
Toronto. But
It
they've
keeps
got
form with the Toronto and Florida.
yeah, but the fact that Tampa's got a higher percentage chance than Toronto is honestly kind of crazy to me.
Hmm.
Following that, we've got Boston at 64.8, and then Ottawa at 44.8, Detroit at 44.2, Buffalo at
Wow.
38.1. So you can see that they still think Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit, that grouping has a ways to go to supplant the old guard. And
Hmm.
like we've mentioned, these models can only take history into account. And you know, obviously past player performance, they don't really account for too much regression from a player. Now they do, right? They've got age curves and whatnot, but I find it interesting that you know, at least Evolving Hockey and the Athletic put out points, so we can see that there's really only 6 points between the two projections, 5 points between the two projections. It's just the
Yeah.
rest of the division and how it shakes out, which I guess is kind of fair. That's one of the things the Sabres have to look at is, you know, what happens with Boston? What happens with Tampa? Does Ottawa finally make the jump and take some points off you? Does Detroit, you know, round back into form, and are they all of a
Yeah.
sudden, you know, a threat, right? So it really does impact the rest of the division, impacts Buffalo's chances.
Yeah, and I don't think we talk about it enough because there's not really much you can do about that. Yes, you can win your own games, but if Detroit goes and beats the crap out of all the teams in the Metro, there's nothing you can do about that as the Sabres. So I think that's maybe why I feel like that's something we don't talk about very much, not just us in general, but sports media, is that if another team just pops off in your division, you can improve plenty. But if they improve more than you and you were meant to get that second wild card, you're just not going to make it at no fault of the team. It's just a matter of the other team improved more.
I think part of that, though, on the other side, just to play devil's advocate, is
Hmm.
if you just end up playing, I don't care how good Detroit does against the Metro, if I end up playing at a 98-point pace, history
Hmm.
shows that I'm going to make the playoffs. So as
Yeah,
long
that's
as
true.
you take care of your own business, the rest of the division shouldn't matter as much. Now, when it comes to seeding, right, when you start talking, oh, we're on pace for 98 and the Lightning are on pace for 99 and you know, Boston's on pace for 97 and who's getting that third spot and who's getting the Wild, that's when I'd look more at it. But as far as making
Yeah.
the playoffs, I would say that it's more about how do you do in your games. If you play at a
Mm.
60% points percentage, you're likely going to be on track for the playoffs. And if Detroit
Yeah.
pops off, good for them. If that means somebody else is dropping points somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That everyone can't make a million points unless everybody decides to go to overtime every single game or something like that. Just
Yeah,
in friggin' point inflation.
get rid of the loser point. I'm here for the 3-2-1 system. We can talk about that later in the season as we
Yeah, yeah.
wind down and talk about more standing stuff. But speaking of
Hmm.
standings, there were 2 games played that impacted the actual standings. As I have mentioned, the Buffalo Sabres played in the Global Series, losing both games to the New Jersey Devils, scoring 1 goal in both, 4-1 loss in the first game, and a 3-1 loss in the second game.
Mm.
Kind of disappointing. And I don't want to be reactionary, right? Because the Bills have just lost twice in really terrible fashion, getting blown out and then poor coaching decisions. And then you turn around and the Sabres lose twice, scoring 1 goal in both games. And it's really easy to get sucked into the local media and the local, you're just at the bar and just talking sports, get sucked into, oh, it's over, fire everybody, everything sucks. I don't want to be too reactionary to the 2 losses. What I want to talk about more is how they played. And I did not like how they played whatsoever. I would have been okay with the 2 losses had they looked a better team. If the Sabres play, like Tage and Tuck and Quinn and Cousins and all those guys looked like they were improved, then I would have absolutely been like, you know what? It's 2 games. The Devils are tougher than we thought. We didn't give them enough credit on our predictions. Yada, yada, yada. Yeah, foreign country, different, not home cooking, mom's pasta, whatever.
Gotta have that Czech strudel.
Yes, right. Right. You're just not used to being there, and it's different. You're not home. It's way different. And there's no Sabres fans there to cheer you on. But they just looked like the Sabres that ended last season. And maybe I can try and sugarcoat it and say, well, they really had a shortened preseason. They didn't have a ton of time to gel. There's only so much they can do. They had to fly over there. It's earlier than everybody else, right? So we got like a week less. We got less tune-up time in the preseason where you're allowed to make mistakes. These games counted. Sure, but a lot of it looked the same. I mean, the guys that looked the best were the guys that weren't here last year. So the bottom, like the fourth line, I actually really liked it. I liked Malenstein a lot. I liked Abe Kubel. Unfortunately, he's now on IR. Sam Lafferty looked good with his chances. I mean, even Greenway hustled. I didn't think he was that impressive, but he at least looked a little bit better. Ryan McLeod looked phenomenal defensively.
There you go.
Like, Jesus, oh my God, he was really good. But ultimately, everybody else looked poor. They looked slow. They looked sluggish. And people want to say, well, they were in Europe. It's like, oh, what? Is New Jersey now in Europe? Did I miss that part? Does New Jersey have home ice advantage? Like, just because you're in Europe doesn't mean you have an excuse to skate slow, especially when the other team is skating circles around you. Yeah. And it was just really, really frustrating to see.
Yeah, I think, like you said, we definitely underrated New Jersey in our season predictions, and I think they took that personally. But you look at New Jersey, right? They've got 2 good goalies in Markstrom and Allen, both of whom showed out in their games. And the Devils as well are a fast team, right? A very fast, skilled team. And I think the one major thing concerning, yes, it's great. All the new acquisitions look good. It's good that Greenway looks like he's hustling. But ultimately, those guys doing well is more of a nice bonus, more of a, hey, maybe that takes you from a 92-point team to a 95-point team. The way this team is going to get to the playoffs is if the stars are playing like stars, if Tuck, Thompson, Peterka, Quinn, all these guys, Cousins, Dahlin, if all these guys are playing up to the level and they get good goaltending from UPL and Levi, that's the only way this team is going to make the playoffs. So it's definitely a little discouraging to see the stars not showing out for the first couple games, but maybe, like we said, maybe they were a little extra affected by the jet lag. I don't know American geography too well. I don't know how much further Buffalo is to the Czech Republic than New Jersey, but regardless, all we can do is hope they get back, take some rest, and kind of Lindy Ruff can motivate them to have that energy, and really they have the ability to skate their opponents into the ground. They're a fast team now, especially with their bottom 6, McLeod, Lafferty, unfortunately not Obey Kubel for a little bit, but Beck Malenstein. These guys are fast, like we talked about in the last podcast. And they have that ability, so I'd like to see the top 6 take more of a directive from the bottom 6 and bring that energy as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. We were promised this fast, hard-hitting, aggressive attacking team, and that team wore red and black both games. The Sabres didn't bring their alternates, by the way.
They didn't do a rebrand.
No. I mean, we've got our black and red alternates, but we weren't red and black. So, I mean, what I saw out of New Jersey was really, really good. And if they can keep that up for the majority of the season, we are going to look so bad with our predictions, not talking about them in the playoffs. But talking about the Sabres, it's not all bad. You guys over there on the West Coast are the kings of the PDO. The Sabres apparently weren't. In the first 2 games of the season, their PDO combined for a 91.6. Reminder that 100 is what you should be averaging. Most teams average like 99.7 to like 103. That's the average. 91.6 is ridiculously low. Now, I don't think the Sabres deserve to win either game. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, they just got unlucky. They looked bad. Maybe it's not as bad as it looks. I don't know. Maybe it just was one of the things you saw it. You thought it, so you saw it, right? Self-fulfilling prophecy or whatever it's called.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, right, it's 2 games. It's an 82-game season, not a 2-game season. So there's no need to overreact to this. It's okay to take the insights and I hope Coach Ruff does get that top 6 motivated to skate. Those are okay takeaways to take away, but the sky certainly isn't falling. You guys still have all the new additions who are looking good. You guys still have all the star power to get this started at some point. I think if we get 10, 15 games in and we're still kind of feeling the same, that's maybe where we start to get a little more concerned and we can start thinking about, what's wrong here and start diagnosing. But I think it's just a little too early to start dissecting every individual little thing and trying to come up with solutions.
I'm hoping that they get the home opener and they get fired up after kind of getting embarrassed over in Europe, right? Yeah. I mean, you scored 1 goal in each game, right?
Yeah.
One was a scrum that Tage just happened to poke in, and the other was a nice worked goal by Owen Power, who, we'll talk about it now. I'm not going to dive too much into it. Like you said, it's 2 games, not even in the continental North America. We'll just throw those out, and so be it, right? The year the Devils had 100 points, they lost their first 2 games as well. So it's not all over. By the way, I think there was only 2 teams in the NHL last year that started 0-2. Do you know what 2 teams those were?
I'm going to say Edmonton was 1.
Correct.
It was Florida, was it?
It was Florida.
Oh, wow. So you guys, freaking Sabres going to Super Bowl, obviously.
Yeah, Sabres to the Stanley Cup. So, all right, we'll wrap this segment up, though, with some studs and duds. Something I wanted to start incorporating just so you can kind of get a glimpse of who's playing well each week and who, might need to pick it up. I think I have 1 stud for the week, and it's Owen Power. Owen Power he just looked so good. He looked like what he was promised to be. He's in his, I think, this will be his 3rd full season now. And he just looks like the Owen Power that you got number 1 overall. He was driving the net. He was making plays. He was really, responsible with his gap integrity, to borrow from a football term, right? He's not ever going to be a guy that's going to throw the body. He's never going to be a guy that's constantly delivering hits, but he's going to be responsible defensively. He's going to have his angles right. He's going to make good passes, and he's a guy that can, freewheel in the offensive zone a little bit. Now, he's not going to skate like Byram and Dahlin, but I really, he was probably the one guy I was most happy with this week for the Sabres.
Yeah, and I think as we've seen from Norris Trophy winner Quinn Hughes last year, you don't necessarily need to be a big guy throwing the body to be a good defenseman defensively. Sure, he's not going to be winning the shutdown defenseman of the year trophy without those, but he can still be a very, very effective top line level defender, just using smart defensive IQ, poke checking, all this stuff, and using his speed, both not just in the offensive zone, but using his speed in the defensive zone as well, to stay with attacking players and to cover around the ice. So I agree with your assessment that Powers look good so far in the season. Again, not to microanalyze, but also that he has the ability to have that strong defensive game while also being mobile, both on defense, in transition, and in the offensive zone as well.
And then we will move on to the spot that nobody likes to talk about, the duds. I do have 3 duds this week.
Well, 3. I guess you guys did lose 2 games, so it's 1 + 1 for each loss.
Yeah, it's just kind of a general feeling. I'm not going to limit myself. If we win like 3 games, 10-0 in a week, the whole team's going to be a stud, right?
Yeah.
And same thing on the opposite end for duds. But the 3 duds I have this week, Yuri Kulik is going to be the first one. He just doesn't look ready for prime time. I mean, you can't really hide against a team like the Devils, and it's not like you're going to have many easy matchups in the National Hockey League. He just doesn't quite look ready to do the little things at NHL speed, which is not saying he's never going to be able to do that, but I think the potential for him to come up and could win the Calder with the ice time and injury, I think we can put that to bed. I think Jiri Kulich still needs a little bit of time in Rochester. It was not a very encouraging game. I know it was one game, but oh boy, when a guy is outclassed, he's outclassed. And well, Jiri Kulich he didn't really have it in 2 out of 3 zones, which is never good for your longevity. The next guy I'll talk about as a dud, and then I'll get your thoughts on it. Matthias Samuelsson. Man, I like Samuelsson. People love him way more than I do, so I don't want to be like a Samuelsson hater, but I've never really seen it with him. I'm not the kind of guy that favors shutdown defensemen whose only thing is they eat pucks for breakfast and they hit people, right? Because the modern NHL is a little bit more than that. Now, it's a little bit simplistic to say that's all Samuelsson does, but I tweeted this out on the Expansion Bros account that there was a goal scored by, I think it was Nason. He was all alone in front because Samuelsson just fired the puck to the away from the boards to Zucker, who had a defender right on his back. There's nothing he's going to do there. You got to see that and just get it off the boards and out, or just fire that thing a little bit harder behind him so it does. But no, he basically he did put it close to Zucker's stick. The defender for New Jersey, Kane, picked it off, fired it to Nason. Nason's one-on-one with UPL, goal. And all of a sudden, things go from bad to worse. And it's just one of those things with Samuelsson. I'm like, he's got the defensive side down, cool, but you need to get out of your zone. And to do that, you need to be able to move the puck. And his passing, I mean, he could be wide open all alone and try and fire across the rink. And it's not good. So I would have loved to see a little bit of improvement. There still might be, obviously, 2 games, but yikes, puck moving Samuelsson, like, you need to get better at it. And the final dud I have this week is the power play. The power play was absolutely atrocious. They lost every face-off. Every face-off.
Whoa.
They had 6 power play opportunities, and they lost 6 face-offs. I'm sorry, the first face-off of the power play. They lost it all 6 times.
Gotcha. Okay.
Not only that, then it took them another minute to get back into the zone. They couldn't get into the zone against New Jersey, so they lost the puck, and then you couldn't get into the zone. That's not a recipe for success on the power play. Now, power play 2 created a couple chances, still couldn't bury it, but they had some opportunities. But the power play as a whole, leave whatever you were planning on doing in Europe and draw something brand new up when the plane lands here in Buffalo, because holy smokes, that power play was horrific. And that's one of the things, that was one of our keys to the season. Power play goes from 29th to league average, and you probably make the playoffs. It's looking worse than 29th right now.
Ooh. So just to summarize, your 3 duds are Kulich, Samuelsson, and the power play, yes?
Correct.
All right, so let's go one by one. Let's start with Kulich. I'm not going to be too hard on Kulich. I think, obviously, Sabres fans had big hopes for him, but sometimes players just aren't ready, right? Like Mackie has been sent down as well, and he looked pretty decent. Like, being sent down is, and I understand Kulich's already done well enough in the minors, but just a little more seasoning, I think, never hurts. And when you're one of the primary prospects on your AHL team, you get all the attention from the trainers, you get all the attention from the coach, you get the best players to play around you, and that can be great. So, if anything, I think it's good that Buffalo has the depth to be able to send down Kulich. And now I understand he did so poor that he probably would have been sent down regardless whether they had the depth or not. But
actually, because of the Abe Kubel injury, he's still on the roster, so he might get another shot at it. He just looked really poor. Just to clarify.
I see. Thank you for clarifying. Well, I'll be honest. I hope he doesn't. I hope he goes down to the minors and gets the seasoning he needs, because I've seen, as a Canucks fan, I've seen the dangers of calling up your prospects too soon. We saw it with the 2 draft picks we had in the same year, Virtanen and McCann. We stunted McCann's growth for years. Look at him now. He's great, but he could have been that if he had just gotten his development proper instead of forcing him in the NHL that first year. Completely ruined him for years, and Virtanen completely just never developed. So I'm all for giving players an extra season too long in the AHL rather than setting them back 3 or 4 years by playing them in the NHL too early. So I won't be too hard on Kulich. For Matthias Samuelsson, you have that guy locked in long term, and you need him to be able to make a pass. It's just that simple. You need him to be able to make the smart plays. I understand he's not your top pairing defenseman. You already have your stud defenseman in Dahlin, Byram, and Power, but you still need other defensemen to complement those, right? If you look at defensive cores like Carolina, Boston, even Vancouver at this point, right? You have defensemen who complement the studs on that blue line, and Samuelson needs to be able to complement these more offensively minded players if he's going to be a defensive shutdown defenseman. So he just can't be. When you're a defensive defenseman, you don't want to be noticed. The less people see about you, the better. So if he's getting noticed for giveaways and stuff like that, that's the worst thing that can happen when you're a defensive defenseman. It's acceptable, right? If Byram goes for a skate and scores a marvelous goal, but also, passes a puck off, that's Byram. He's an offensive defenseman. That's the downside of an offensive defenseman, is sometimes they give the puck away. If you're a defensive defenseman, you have to shut things down, and you can't be making mistakes like that. And then lastly, for the power play, like I'll say from the Canucks power play was dynamite last year, and that was one of the things that got them going. So, like you said, uh, when you lose that first face-off, you lose all the momentum, right? If you win that first face-off, you set up, you can get a body out front, you can see, do you want to go low, do you want to go high, do you want a point shot, how many layers of traffic do you have, are you trying to play tic-tac-toe, and you can analyze what the PK for the other team is doing as well, and figure out how you want to pick it apart. When you're just when it's sent out, your mentality is totally different. The defense gains confidence, and they also have the ability, like you mentioned, to like forecheck and keep you out of the zone. You can't even set up. And yes, obviously there are goals that are scored on the power play on the rush as you're getting into the zone. But the whole point of a power play is you start off with offensive zone possession, and you can set it up. You can score on the rush 5-on-5 too. The whole point of the power play is, okay, we have this extra man. Let's set this up how we want. Set up a one-timer. Take a tip shot. Get traffic, right? And if you lose half the power play, again, like I said earlier, you need your studs to take this team to the next level. Your studs are off after a minute because they're tired, because the first minute the power play is wasted. And yes, it's great that the power play 2 is, setting up some chances, but again, your power play 2 should not be what's getting you to the playoffs. It needs to be power play 1 with your stars.
Agreed, absolutely. And having Tage Thompson and Dahlin, we both have him in fantasy.
Yes.
So that would be very nice if they could get the power play going.
Please.
Our studs are going to get going. Abby, I don't know if you want to talk about any preseason games or just some final thoughts on the preseason from the Canucks. I know we probably don't want to dive too deeply into the details of the preseason games, but if you got anything, let me know.
Yeah. I'll just brush over the two Canucks games. They seem to play the same team twice. They did it with the other two teams, and they've done it with the Oilers this week. They had 3-2 overtime loss to the Oilers, followed up by a 4-1 win. I will say the 3-2 loss, the Oilers had McDavid and Draisaitl in. The Canucks were missing, I think, 2/3 of their top six. So it was definitely the BC squad up against the Oilers. Lankin in the net was probably the third goalie when Demko's healthy. And missing again, like JT Miller was out. I don't remember if Pedersen was in or not, but the Canucks put up a very good fight. Good game from Lankinen, so that inspires some confidence that, while that sounds like Demko isn't going to be out for too much longer, maybe only a month and a half or so, but regardless, Seelovs has also looked excellent, which I'll talk about in a sec. But there's no worries in goaltending, which is what I'm saying.
Thank goodness.
Additionally, big takeaway from that game, which kind of goes into the next game as well, is Baines has looked really good. Arshdeep Baines, just from Abbotsford, I believe it's Abbotsford. It just has been more and more and more primed to take a spot. And I think people were trying to give this spot to Ratu or other players, Carlson, Sasson, and Baines has just had a spectacular end to the preseason after what was already a strong preseason in the first place. Talking about the 4-1 game, Baines had a big power play goal in that game as well. And just overall, and an assist as well. Overall, he's looked good. The other point in that 4-1 game, Seelovs was stellar. He looked like he was back in playoff form. And he was robbing the Oilers. There was one big save he made. I think it was on Nugent Hopkins. And that was, again, full Oilers team. And I think the big difference between the 3-2 game and the 4-1 game was the Canucks finally iced their normal lineup. Pedersen, Besser. And the one other thing I'd note in terms of preseason players, Pedersen and DeBrusk are looking like they're starting to develop some chemistry, which is exactly what Canucks fans have been praying for. Give Pedersen a winger that's better than like a fourth liner.
Yes, please.
Which we're very excited about. Speaking of Pedersen's wingers, I'd also have a couple other roster and moves to note while we're here. Höglander got extended to a 3x3, which is very exciting. I think it's a decent price. Hoglander is someone who can move up and down the lineup, and I think can play on every single line on both sides. Um, so that's exciting to see. So we could see him right now. It looks like the lines are going to be Miller, Besser with Heinen, but we could see both Heinen and Hoglander interchanged. And the second line looks like it's going to be Pedersen with Sprong and DeBrusque. So we could see Sprong move up and down as well, depending on how the season goes. And Hoglander could fit in there. Right now he's on the third line. So we can see when Joshua gets back how that works. But wherever Hoglander is playing, he had 20 goals last year, all even strength. I think Hoglander absolutely has the ability to be a top 6 player in this league if given power play time and opportunity. So very excited. He reminds me a bit of a Zach Hyman, where he kind of goes in and attacks the puck, hits, causes turnovers. So hopefully his game can continue to develop. And I'm again very happy with the contract. I don't know what you think, Rye.
Yeah, so I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I did not stay up late to watch more Canucks preseason hockey. I will start staying up to watch Canucks games during the regular season, but sorry, but I'm not watching the preseason. On your points, though, about just some of my thoughts. I like the idea that Baines is forcing off other more prominent names just based off of his play, right? Because it's one of the things that he doesn't have. He doesn't have the draft reputation. He doesn't have the name that everybody knows that from playing Chell or whatever, right? He's more of an unknown commodity, and those guys sometimes are just fighting and scrapping and clawing, and that sets a really, really strong example in the locker room, even to some of the young guys that he pushes out, that, hey, this is the kind of effort and hustle and play you need to have
for sure.
to make the NHL roster. And that's how NHL teams gets better, right? The classic saying, iron sharpens iron. If you got a Baines hustling, imagine if he rubs off on Lekaramaki or something like that, right? And the Lekaramaki starts hustling and working as hard as that, then all of a sudden, Lekaramaki, he's got the more natural talent, obviously, but sometimes these guys just aren't ready. So good for a guy like that. Speaking of good for a guy like that, I love the fact that Hoglander got that contract, man. I believe last season, we were talking at 5-on-5. He was one of the best goal scorers. So in the modern NHL, you need 5-on-5 goal scoring. Obviously, in every NHL, but like in the playoffs, the refs swallow their whistles. Where you're going to be playing 5-on-5, overtime is 5-on-5. You need 5-on-5 goal scoring, and to get a guy that can do that on any line, plays 12 and a half minutes, could easily slot up higher in the lineup, and just puts in goals. I mean, he's just, I've been kind of doing watching analysis of the times we live in, the modern NHL. He is the perfect example of a modern NHLer that can just produce so much offense and has so much skill, yet plays less than 13 minutes a night. So good for him, good price, the kind of guy you need, because you can't bank on your top 6 playing 82 of 82. That's just not going to happen. And to have that flexibility, we know we love to have these conversations at the beginning of the season. Oh, what are the lines? Blah, 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 blah. They end up changing in 3 weeks anyway. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, well, this is now a line that I never thought of. And I think he's the perfect guy. I think it's a great contract. I'm stoked to see him back in Vancouver. One of my favorite guys to root for. So hope to have him have much more success coming up. And speaking of coming up, there are more regular season games coming up.
Yes, there is. 2 games for the Canucks this week. The home opener against Calgary is on Wednesday. And their other game, I believe, is against the Flyers on Friday. And we take on the Flyers every year super, super early, which is confusing. Usually at the Flyers, so at least they're here this week. Very much looking forward, as that's 2 very beatable opponents, but obviously, it's like it's hockey, right? You never know what's going to happen, but I think it's also a good opportunity to kind of tune up before we have to face stronger opponents in the following weeks. I don't think Demko's going to be ready for about a month and a half. So Seelov's likely is the day 1 starter. And then, as we talked about for lineups and stuff, it looks like Pedersen, Sprong, DeBrusque is going to be a line. It looks like Miller, Besser, Heinen's going to be a line. It looks like it's Ratu. Again, this is just off of Daily Faceoff. Ratu, Garland, and Hoglander are going to be a line, and then Sherwood, Amon, and Baines are potentially going to be a line. And
okay,
again,
that's pretty solid.
It's solid. We have Suter on IR right now. We have Joshua out, so I'm okay. I wouldn't really want Oman to be a staple for the Canucks, but as a temporary 4C and a spare player to go up and down, I think Oman's just fine. I think Rick Tockett's probably higher on him as well than the average person. And it just is a fun name to say. Um, but overall, I think is looking very deadly. You've got different different forwards like a Sprong and a Hoglander who we've talked about have that ability to score. Um, and that's that's something Canucks could use for sure. Scoring that can move up and down the lineup. Ryan talked about earlier how Hoglander makes the most out of his minutes in terms of goal scoring. Sprong is known for the exact same thing. So, giving Sprong in particular the actual minutes alongside really good players to do this, he obviously, as we talked about in the last episode as well, has the potential for that 30-35 goal mark if he can kind of keep up some of that same momentum. Obviously, it's not going to be a one-to-one shift. If he can score uh, 20 goals in 12 minutes. He's not going to score 40 goals in 24 minutes. It's not a one-to-one thing, but there's a lot of offensive upside there in that starting lineup and a lot of versatility as well, right? People like Dakota Joshua can move up, Garland can move up, Heinen can move up and down, Sherwood could move up a little bit, Hoglander, all these guys, Patterson can go play with, they can really like Lotto 649 with Besser, Miller, and Petey. There's just so much versatility with this team, which is really exciting because it means we have the ability to stand up to adversity. Um, and speaking of that, on the D core as well, something we've always been concerned about is Canucks have generally had a weaker D core than they have forward core. Obviously, Hughes and Hronek are known commodities. Tyler Myers had a really good comeback season and kind of went from the Canucks fans' whipping boy to a fan favorite. Susie was very good last year when he was healthy, and he's back. And then on the bottom pair, we have Forbert and Desharnais, who looked very, very solid in preseason. Um, so I think along with Juleson and Friedman and the recently acquired Eric Brandstrom, who again I would have loved to see stay up on the team, but the fact that they snuck him through waivers, considering some of the people who are claimed today, um, is very exciting. You can bring him up later in the season if Friedman or Juleson aren't cutting it, um, or if there's injuries, and I think he'll do really well for the Canucks later in the season. And then goalies, obviously, you have Demko, who's hopefully going to come back. Silovs and Lankinen both looked solid in their last two starts. So very comfortable there. And speaking of goalies, just want to throw in there, the Canucks won the game of Patera hot potato, I should say. As for those unaware, the Canucks put Patera on waivers. He was claimed by Boston, and now Vancouver has reclaimed him, and they get to send him down. So take that, Boston. We got extra, right? We got DeBrusk, we got Heinen, and we got Patera. Okay, we won the trade. Okay,
I
you
mean,
guys can have Lindholm and Sidorov.
you had Patera first though, right? So
Well, they got him, and we took him back. So you know what? I'm considering a part of the deal. The official deal, 1-for-1, or 4-for-2, I should say, is Forbert, Patera, DeBrusk, and Heinen for Lindholm and Zadorov, and then they were assigned to extensions magically.
okay.
That's
Well, you know what?
that's how I'm referring to it.
Yeah, however you want to look at it, I think you guys are in a pretty good position to start the season. I think that roster, those lines, that lineup, I mean, it all looks pretty good. I don't want to look too far into the future because everything can change, but you talk about the month that Demko's out. I'm not looking at a ton of offensive firepower coming your way. Obviously Calgary and Philly this upcoming week, Tampa. I mean, then you got Florida, but Philly again, Chicago, Pittsburgh. I've said that I'm not too high on them. Carolina, Hurricanes, and the Devils. San Jose, Anaheim, the Kings, right? So, like, that's all your games in the next month. That's not the worst schedule to not have your starting goaltender, right? I'm not saying, like, you guys are playing, the bottom five every single night between now and his return. But, I mean, I would much rather have Demko healthier for tougher stretches down the line. One thing I will note, Daniel Sprong and Nils Hoglander are not the same. Daniel Sprong is far worse defensively. I mean, he is
Very true.
horrible defensively. Nils Hoglander is great on every inch of the ice. So that's exciting there. I mean, obviously, your season prediction, your hot take could come true. The 30-some goals, right? You said 30 goals, 35?
35 goals, I think.
Yeah, that would be crazy. I hope it does. But you're going to have to be okay with a lack of defense, I should say.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, 2 games, get your feet wet, should start off with 3 points, at least, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'd say 1 out of 2 wins is is good, but I'd say you probably should win both of these games. Obviously,
Yeah,
nothing
absolutely.
ever happens as it should because it's hockey.
Yeah.
Buffalo's already played 2. We've got 2 coming up. We've got the, oh God, I just sorted by shots instead of date. The LA Kings and the Florida Panthers coming up. And it doesn't get easier, right? I mean, you just got smacked by the Devils back to back. Your home opener is the Kings. That's going to be an interesting one to see how, I'm really curious to see how both teams do, right? The Sabres already have 2 games under their belt. They are flying back from Europe. Let's see how it goes. And then the Florida Panthers. Honestly, this is the time to get the Florida Panthers, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because they played hockey, competitive hockey, just 4 months ago. Just 4 months ago. Like, come on, man. And they've been playing. Like, they have not had much time off. They're going to have that Stanley Cup hangover because almost every team does. Nobody ever hits the ground super hot after winning the Cup. They'll still be a good team, but we do get them twice here in the month of October, which is not the worst time to get the Cup winner. I think you need to win one of these games. Just find a way to win one of them. Perform better too. Again, if for me, it's more about performances than actual points. Right now, obviously that'll change if we start getting a lot of good performances that aren't rewarded with points. Then we might have to really worry about the points. But if they can compete against both of these teams and pick up a win, maybe 2, then we head on the road to face Pittsburgh, Columbus, and Chicago. I think that's a nice road trip for you to potentially pick up 5 of 6, 4 of 6. I don't know. I'm looking at it that way. We gotta get a 60% win percentage somehow. So or points percentage, I should say. So if we can get 4 from our next 2, we'll be at 50% on the season. Hopefully, a way to get to 60%. Should be interesting though. I'm excited for it. I get to go. It's the home opener. I'll be there in the stands. So I hope to be entertained because those 2 games, dude, I was sitting there with my work laptop on the couch watching the games because they were like 1 p.m. on a Friday.
Yeah.
I was just like, this is depressing. I'm watching this during work. Why? Like, let me just go back and do more work. Like, it was just terrible, man. So again, that fast, exciting team we were promised. Hopefully it comes to fruition when I'm there in the building, but that's all I have for this time. Abby, anything else?
I was gonna say, if your hockey team is playing so bad it makes you want to work, I think your hockey team has a little work to do with themselves.
Yeah, they got some work to do, and their next chance to do it comes against the Kings. Before that, we've got Vancouver versus the Calgary Flames Wednesday night. Hockey is back. You are back. We are back.
Yeah.
Hit us up on Twitter at the Expansion Bros Pod. We'd love to hear your thoughts. How are you guys feeling about the season? What are some of the things you're looking forward to? What are the things that you're worried about? And what do you want to see from us as a podcast? We'd love to get more listener interaction. If you could DM us or tweet at us, we'd love to hear it. Also, share with your friends. We can be found wherever you can get your podcasts and on YouTube. Just look up the Expansion Bros. RyeBread SN is the channel. That's all I have for this one, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.
Peace.